Video and photo backlogs can leave you overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out. We've been there, and our fears of outsourcing stopped us in the past. Can you find an editor as invested in your brand as you are? Will other photographers and filmmakers we network with look down on us for not editing everything on our own? That fear of outsourcing can be detrimental to your career. That's why we love our partnership with Weditor. Their attention to details with not only our work, but also their care for their clients through all steps of the outsourcing process lets us fully step back from editing and focus on what we love, knowing our work is receiving the attention it needs. More than just editing, Weditor is passionate about demystifying the outsourcing market. Follow Weditor on Instagram at we_r_Weditor for free educational tips, tools, and resources to guide you through the insanity of today's editing market. For an even deeper dive, follow Weditor's blog at weditor.com/outsourcing.
Welcome to the We Got You podcast, a network curated for wedding photographers and filmmakers that dives deep into the strategies and tactics to transitioning a side hustle in the wedding industry into a full-time, thriving career. We're your hosts, luxury wedding filmmaker Emma K. Films and luxury destination wedding photographer Hannah Brook Photography. It wasn't too long ago that we picked up our cameras for the first time, having absolutely no idea where it would lead us. Years later, we're traveling the globe for beautiful destination weddings, built our dream lifestyles, and run multi-six-figure careers. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't easy, but it is attainable and so worth it. And we're ready to teach you our strategies. Covering a variety of topics from both our firsthand experiences and reputable guest speakers' insights crucial for business growth, we're exploring the art of marketing within your niche, discussing effective ways to attract and retain clients, leverage social media, and build a strong online presence, and so much more. We're not shying away from talking through the challenges of the wedding industry and offering realistic solutions to navigate them successfully. We emphasize the importance of networking, establishing meaningful relationships with clients, and continuously honing one's craft to stand out in a competitive market. This is the We Got You podcast. Good morning, We Got You podcast. We hope you all are having an incredible start to your week. Hannah and I are stoked today because we get to talk about prep work before the wedding day. Obviously, throughout this whole new year, throughout the entire rebrand, Hannah and I really wanted to dedicate this year, we'll dedicate the future of the podcast to talking to specifically wedding photographers and videographers. And with that, we wanted to start creating episodes that really we felt could tailor into specifically the wedding day or before the wedding day, but really what it would look like in terms of what photographers and videographers should be kind of looking for, what information you should have before the wedding day, and basically what are the things that are going to make filming or photographing on the wedding day easier that you can implement today. We're just going to kind of walk through some of these things that we think are really important, and I'll kind of just kick it off and go through the first one. And all of these pieces of advice or all of these tips, these are all for photo and video. So we just want to make that clear that these are things again, the prep work that you can do beforehand. Hannah and I, speaking for both of us, honestly, there's a lot of prep work that goes into before we actually show up on the wedding day. I definitely remember when I was in the early stages of my business, just showing up on the wedding day and, kind of winging it and seeing how it goes. But especially as you get into the higher market and just as you want to serve your couples more and create a higher end experience for them, regardless of the niche that you're in, it does come with doing more of the prep work behind the scenes before the wedding day so that you can show up and not be stressed out and not have a billion questions to ask the planner or the bride and groom. That is not what you want at all. So with all that to be said, obviously the first thing that you want to have before the wedding day is the timeline. And this, of course, is the no-brainer. We're going to just start out with it because everyone is going to get a timeline before they show up to the wedding day. But I really think it's important that even you ask for it ahead of time, plenty of time ahead of time. Don't be looking for the timeline the week before the wedding, because even if you have, whether you're working with the bride and groom specifically or you're working with a planner, you should be able to at least go through maybe a rough draft, a few weeks before, because especially from a videographer and photographer perspective, there are so many timelines that I've looked at where I'm hey, we need to allocate a little bit more time here, or hey, we don't need as much time here. And just really looking through what that timeline is, especially if you're not working with a planner and you're working with a bride and groom, odds are they're not super confident in writing their own timeline. And maybe Hannah, you could touch on this as well of helping your clients write the timeline, but kind of looking through and thinking, okay, is there anything that needs changed? And you shouldn't just be like the day before the wedding being like, hey, we need to change all of that. That's going to stress your clients out. That's going to stress the planner out. And so actually getting to go through it ahead of time is so beneficial. And then making it a visually appealing copy that you can use as like the wallpaper on your iPhone the day of the wedding. I love doing this. I'll go on a Canva and I've just literally got like a black slide and it's just got the entire timeline condensed, written on there for me that I can save as the wallpaper to my phone so I can quickly and easily reference it without having to unlock my phone, go to my Photos app, dig it out, show someone. Like it's right there and super easy for me to see. And so super important to look at it ahead of time. And yeah, I don't know, Hannah, if maybe you want to talk about, especially from the photographer perspective of like the importance of writing it with your couple, if you have the opportunity to do so and not a planner.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is so many people, especially in your first several years of your business, you're creating that timeline with your planners because with your couples, because there's not always a wedding planner at your weddings. When you're getting into more of those higher end weddings, luxury weddings, there is always a planner who is creating that timeline with the couple. And then they bounce off those ideas with you as the photographer. But a lot of the times, if you're not shooting a higher end wedding, you're creating that with your couple. And that's what I did for the first several years of my business, was really working with my couple and creating a timeline that worked the best. Because you think about it, we've done dozens of weddings at that point. Even if you're in your second year, you've still done more than your bride and groom have done. And so you still have more of that experience, and to know how much time you're going to need, like Emma was saying, to allocate for specific things. I've had bride and grooms be like, all right, 10 minutes for family photos. And I was like, yeah, it might take 10 minutes to find grandma. Like we're going to need a little bit more time. And so, even just like educating your couples, and that's also a great space when you're working with your couples. And I would highly recommend doing this over a FaceTime call, doing it over a Zoom call. Don't try to do this over an email or over a text message, but like have that face-to-face time with them, asking them what their important parts of the days are, so that you can make sure that you have plenty of time to really, truly document it to the best of your ability. But then also having that be a spot to educate your couples and kind of share with them why specific things take more time, or what you're going to need to look for in the timeline. It creates, for them, they see you obviously as someone, okay, you've done this before and I can fully trust you because you are educated and you know what you're doing. A couple dozen episodes back, I actually did do an episode on timeline creation for your couples. And so if you're like, I don't know how to create a timeline for my couples, but that is something that you're looking at doing because maybe you're not working weddings where they always have planners, go back, listen to that episode. We went through like all the ins and outs of like what you need to create that timeline. But then also another thing too is remembering that like if you are creating a timeline and then maybe they book a planner midway through their planning, or maybe they just have a day of, make sure you guys all have the same timeline. I think it was probably my second year I showed up to a wedding and every single vendor had a different timeline. And it honestly was like kind of a nightmare because everyone's like, well, no, I talked to the bride about this. Well, I talked to the bride about this, And so everyone thinks that they're right. And everybody needs specific time for certain things. The DJ needs to know when toasts are, when this is, and and I need to know when family photos are and everything. So making sure that you're connecting even with the vendors, if you're not maybe working with a planner and you are working with the bride and groom, reach out to the other vendors and make sure that they all are on the same page with your timeline.
Yes. And you want to be on the same page because it's going to make the day go so much more smooth. Like the last thing, because it's like, yes, it is a little bit of extra work for you to have to write a timeline and then maybe to have to email it to the videographer or email it to the photographer and email it to the venue or email it to whoever. But here's the thing. If you're all on the same page, it's going to make for a much less stressful wedding day because you're going to put in this work now that's going to benefit you. I loved when I was able to write timelines with my couples because guess what? I get to write the timeline that I want to write. I get to leave the amount of space that I want to leave. Like that's a huge win for me. And again, like we're talking really with the, like, if you're not working with a planner, if you are working with a planner, you want to give all respect. That is their job to do, for them to give you the timeline. It's great to review it, make any suggestions to them, like very much ahead of time. But that really like advice is for when you're just working with your couples. And Han, I don't know if you would believe me when I say this, but it was actually episode 59, creating a wedding day timeline. Wow. So I feel like we need to definitely do, all the fundamentals are obviously the same, but I feel like we should do another episode on like creating a wedding day timeline and what's important.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. That does not feel like it was that long ago.
Yeah. But for any of you who are interested, like episode 59, built creating a wedding day timeline, like give that a listen, especially if you want to have that be kind of like a part of the client experience that you're offering for your clients. The next one we would love to move into is asking your planner for an inspo board or a design deck or a mood board. All of those are kind of the same things. A design deck is usually what a lot of planners will call it, or a mood board. And then also asking them for floor layouts. Benefits of doing this in terms of the floor layouts is I'm able to get, as a videographer and even as a photographer too, I would say, like we're able to get a good idea of what it would look like in terms of how we would set up toasts or how we would set up filming or photographing the ceremony. For videographers, we're operating with multiple tripods. For toasts, we're operating with our lighting. And so for us to have an idea of what these floor layouts will look like, I can then usually what I will do is take that image, put it into my Canva, and I will use like little X's or little boxes on where I'm planning to put my lighting, where I'm planning to put my tripods, my cameras. So that way I can give it to my second shooter, my third shooter. I can give it to my team ahead of time. So that way I don't necessarily need to be super present in that moment. Obviously on the wedding day, there's so much going on, but my team has a great layout of what it's going to look like. Yes, weddings totally change. On the wedding day, floor layouts can be different. You could show up and it could look nothing like what you were interpreting it as. However, it does not hurt to do the prep work ahead of time. You either take 5 minutes out of your day to look through a reception and a ceremony layout to get a brainstormed idea of how you're going to set up the ceremony and toast, and then show up on the wedding day and that's not what you do and you wasted 5 minutes of your time. Or it's exactly what you planned on doing and you just save 15 minutes brainstorming on the wedding day of how you're going to make the setup look. And so that is super important with floor layouts. And then like maybe we talk a little bit about the importance of like design decks and mood boards from planners.
Yeah. Well, and like honestly too, like even just having all the information beforehand and being able to do that research and educate yourself and, you know, decide where you want things to be, like that effort doesn't go unnoticed. Like Emma was saying, you might show up and it's completely different. And then like, okay, bummer. But like if you show up and then it is the same and you can put that effort in, your couples pick up on that. You'd be surprised at how much your couples notice when things are running smoothly because they can tell when it's not. And so it makes a big difference. And then even on top of that, even just with the planner, you know, and other vendors, the DJ, you know, when you're like ready ahead of time, you know what you're doing, you know what you're coming in for. And he asks, hey, where do you want them to sit for toast? You're like, I already have an answer for you. It's not a hesitation or, I don't know. Like people notice that effort that you put in. And like Emma said, it takes 5 minutes. So even for photographers, you know, I honestly think that this is just another huge reason why it's so important for photo and video teams to have communication before the wedding day, which we have we have a freebie on that. So make sure you guys join our email list if you want our freebie. But it's so important for the photographer and videographer to have that communication because I always say for photo, it's not necessarily as important because I'm not using light stands. You know, like I have a flash that's mobile. It's on my camera, but being able to communicate with the videographer so that you at least, you know, where is it going to be best for things to be, people to go, you know, what is that reception and everything going to look like? It sets you up so that you're not, you know, on the fly working with things. And that's one less thing for you to worry about. And when it comes to like mood boards, you know, design decks and everything, I remember listening to Catherine from Blink Films. She said that she shoots every wedding and she like every single wedding that she shows up to, she kind of gives herself one word for the wedding day and she kind of shoots it with that in mind. So like the word might be, gosh, what were some of the words that she used? I don't know, but it might be like peaceful. I don't know. That's just like a word. That's probably not one that she used. But then you're shooting it and almost like in that style, you know, where you're like really trying to emulate that, where you're like, this like speaks to the couple with the mood board and design deck and everything. You can see truly like what that couple is going for, you know, what is important to them, where they're putting more of their time and maybe money, you know, when it comes to the details, you know, is that ceremony set up super important to them where you can tell that's what they've put a lot lot of time and energy into, and what pieces of the wedding day are really valuable to them. And on top of that, knowing what that inspo board and mood board and everything is going to look like, you're seeing the work that the planner is going to put in so that you can document all of that and have, those photos, the film, the video and everything for then that planner to have as well on top of like the bride and groom. Obviously we're shooting for the bride and groom, but having that also for the planner is going to notice that, effort that's put in and are going to be able to use that as well. You're seeing where that energy is going from other vendors. And so then you can also help those other vendors and create an incredible, wedding gallery and wedding film.
Yeah. And when you're asking a planner for their design deck, they're sending it over to you with what they have in mind, with what their vision is that they're bringing to life. When they're sending you their mood board, when they're sending you their board of inspo photos, they're showing you what they really care about. And so this is huge brownie points with the planner because it's like, wow, this videographer, this photographer wants my design deck because they want to see what I've created and what is important to me. And then obviously it's going to help me because I'm able to look at their design deck and think, okay, here are some of the inspo shots that they have on here. These are some of the shots that, I would love to add some movement and recreate, or I would love to do a little differently, but I would love to, you see those inspo shots so that you can kind of recreate these with the planner in mind, because the planner obviously has the couple in mind, right? So I want to impress the planner because what the planner is doing is solely for the couple, which then my work is going to be impressed by the bride and groom as well. And so huge brownie points for reaching out to them and asking them for that mood board, asking them for that design deck, and for the floor layouts as well. And it takes 2 seconds of their time, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. And honestly, like I could say this a million times, like effort is noticed. And you might think, oh, this is something small, it doesn't really make a difference. It really does. Like that is what builds into your vendor experience. It's not just how are you working with the bride and groom, it's how are you working with all these other people that, come together to make this wedding day incredible. And that is picked up on, whether it's the bride and groom who notice it, or maybe it's the guests who notice, or maybe it's other vendors who are like, wow, like Emma said, you earn those brownie points. And they're like, okay, that's what can get you onto a referral list. That's what gets you other weddings. That's what the bride and groom would love about their vendors. And then they're going to refer them to their friends, like it makes a difference. And you would be surprised. Like I honestly even think my first couple of years, like I wasn't as organized in that sense where I was like doing all of that prep work beforehand. Whereas now looking at the weddings that I do, I'm like, I couldn't imagine not doing it because it does make such a difference.
Does your current client delivery system feel unexciting, limiting, and boring? Maybe you're still using good old Google Drive or Dropbox to deliver your clients' wedding films. If the answer to these is yes, it's time to level up your video delivery experience with VidFlow. VidFlow is a pay-per-use online platform that allows you to deliver fully branded websites for each of your clients. While being incredibly affordable, VidFlow is accessible on mobile, desktop, and smart TVs with included long-term hosting so that your clients can truly enjoy the entire experience when receiving their wedding films. When I first found VidFlow, it was such an easy switch that truly benefited my business substantially. With so many incredible features and options for customization and personalization, VidFlow continues to wow my clients time and time again. You can find VidFlow on Instagram or visit their website at vidflow.co. Use our code WGY20 for 20% off a yearly premium membership and level up your client experience today with VidFlow.
One of the other things too that we wanted to talk about before the wedding day was, knowing communication with your other vendors. So, what gear are you going to use to improve that communication on the wedding day? So, radio headsets can be a huge benefit if you're communicating with one another. Not everyone's going to have their phone on them. And honestly, people should not have their ringer on if they do, because it is a wedding. And that my biggest fear is my phone going off in the middle of a ceremony. Like, honestly, that like terrifies me. I think I check my phone like 4 or 5 times before the ceremony even starts, because that's something you don't want to happen. So my phone typically is off the entire day. Like I have all the sounds, all the noise, ringer, everything off. I have it on me. So I have the timeline, but that's not the best form of communication. Like I would say most of my weddings, they are not in different locations when it comes to the ceremony and reception. However, they're venues that are so big where you can't just pop over to the reception or pop over to where the ceremony is and, say something to someone, like you need to have a clear way of communicating with them so that you're not stuck needing something or not sure of where somebody is or waiting on something, and you're not sending your second shooter to go run and do everything for you. You know, like you really need a game plan. Okay, what is going to be best for this wedding day?
Yeah, honestly, I have loved using radio headsets. I just started using them, full transparency, and they have been game changer. I use like the Motorola Clip headsets, and I was totally thinking the same thing. It's like, and every single time I would pick up my phone on the wedding day, I just feel that sense of like, I need to hide it, of like this sense of like, I'm feeling unprofessional bringing out my phone to text my second shooter who's across the room when, especially for videographers, when you're filming during the ceremony and you've got tripods set up in multiple locations, it's going to take you like 20 seconds to get from here to there, or depending on where it is in the venue, where your bride and groom are getting ready. Like I've seen a lot of vendors start to use radio headsets, especially for really high-end weddings, when you've got larger teams who are filming or photographing the bride here and the groom in this room. And so to have that kind of communication that keeps this level of professionalism has been so beneficial to me, because I'm literally able to like just through my ear, just like talk to my second shooter who's across the room or maybe 3 floors up on the hotel and easily communicate. And so I definitely think those are things that you can do beforehand and like invest in that are far worth it to use on the wedding day for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Another thing too is thinking about questionnaires. You know, what are you sending to your couples? What information are you getting from your couples? Em and I also, I don't remember what episode this is. This was not all the way back at 59 though, but Em and I did do episodes, one for photo, one for video, of like what to ask your couples and what you need to like information you need to get from your couples before the wedding day. But we just really wanted to reiterate that in this episode because it makes the world of a difference, and it will completely change how your wedding day goes with those questionnaires and what you're asking them beforehand. If you want to know exactly those like questions that we are, kind of diving into with the couples, go back and listen to those episodes. But a few of the really important things I know for photo to ask even are, finding out who are those important people that you're going to be using for family photos, creating that shot list so that when it comes to family photos, you're not scrambling trying to find grandma and then learning who's related to who and whatnot, or, asking about dad and then realizing dad's not in the picture. Like you don't want to be in one of those situations where you are feeling embarrassed or unprofessional because you didn't know information beforehand. So I would say one of the most important things for photo is finding out, shot list, family, who's important in the wedding day, who's going to be there for the wedding day, bridesmaids, groomsmen. I always ask, who are your people who are sitting there like with you, and even when you're doing this on like, if you're doing this on a FaceTime or a Zoom call instead of a questionnaire, like ask them about their people, like ask them how they know them, ask them like what is like a fun memory of them, like get to know who they are through the bride and groom, because that will give you like a better grasp of how to document their wedding day. Even asking them for on their wedding day questionnaire, like, what are they most excited for? What are those really like key pieces of their wedding day that they want to make sure like if this is the only thing that's photographed, like I will be happy, like what are those really important pieces for them? What are they most excited about? What can they not like wait to hang up on their walls, or like see in a video format, what are, those like almost like VIP moments of their wedding day?
Yeah, honestly, the wedding day questionnaires that I've sent to my couples beforehand have been so vital to me going to the wedding day and not having a billion questions to ask them. Again, like talking between like if you've got a planner who's on board, like a full service planner, like doesn't want a lot of communication with your couple, you obviously don't want to send them a wedding day questionnaire that's just going to make more work for your planner and more work for your couple. But for years, I would send wedding day questionnaires to my couples, and it's been so beneficial, especially on the photographer side of like getting a shot list, from the video side of knowing like, are there any special or unique traditions that are going to happen on the wedding day that I may not know about, especially when you're doing multicultural weddings that you're not familiar with. You want to make sure that you're educating yourself beforehand. This isn't just like I'm going to wing it and just hope that I get it right and I figure it out. You want to be prepared. And so these questions that you're asking on the questionnaire are so vital. And like ideally making it, I don't know, like no more than like 15 minutes that it's going to take them to fill out at most. You don't want to give them this lengthy questionnaire that they have to like set a time for during the day to go through. That's going to take them forever. You want to have it be clear, have it be concise, have it be all of the information that you need and no more than that. So yeah, those wedding day questionnaires are so beneficial to the wedding day.
Yeah, well, and like you said, like when you're working, maybe it's a higher end wedding or whatnot, and you're working with a planner, and maybe they don't want a lot of communication with the couples. I've had a few weddings where it's like the planner's like everything goes through me, like we like almost you don't need to stress out the couple. We don't need a million people messaging the couple, and the planner wants to be that point of communication. Don't let that stop you from getting the answers to these questions. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, I can't send it to my couple, so I'm just not going to get that information. Ask your planner, have a meeting with the planner and say like, hey, do you know what, XYZ, or ask them for a shot list, or ask them if they can get a hold of, this information. And that planner might direct you to reach out to the bride and groom, or that planner is going to get that for you and send that your way. But regardless, like that information is so important for the wedding day, whether that is coming from your couples or the planner. Like, don't let that stop you from being educated and knowing what you're walking into.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more. And then kind of going to the next thing that we want to talk about is choosing one thing ahead of time that you want to get better at. And we talked about this in our last episode of 4 pieces of advice that we would give to our younger selves. And I just kind of want to reiterate it a little bit if you didn't listen to that episode, is that instead of thinking of all of these different things that you want to implement on this next wedding, it's so easy to try to do everything all at once and it overwhelms you. And then you just go back to your old habits. You go back to with what you're comfortable with, because as I mentioned before, you only get one shot at everything on the wedding day. You don't get to redo it multiple times. And so with that comes this stress of, I have to get it right. If you're overwhelmed by all of these new things that you want to try out, it's so easy to just go back to what you're comfortable with because it gets overwhelming. And so just pick one thing ahead of time. I love getting the opportunity to do this because I'm thinking, okay, today I have learned a lot about toast over the last month. So my next wedding, I'm going to just focus on just nailing the toast, just understanding the lighting, reading the room, getting my white balance right, just really focus on how I film the toasts. Or maybe it's couple portraits. Maybe you've been feeling like these last few weddings, you've really been struggling with the couple portraits. And so this next wedding is really your opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to pick 3 photos off Pinterest that I want to try out for my next couple portrait session. And I'm going to bring those to the wedding and just focus on getting some really high quality couple portraits. This can be different, whether it's you focusing on the first look or focusing on your dance footage or focusing on the couple portraits, the getting ready, your audio, your toast. There's so many different pieces of the wedding day that you can focus on. And I encourage you to just choose one thing that you want to get a little bit better at for your next wedding, because especially in this new year, if you choose to get better at one thing every single wedding, then by the time that the end of the year comes, think about how much more confident you're going to be throughout the entire wedding day, as opposed to trying to do all of it all at once, getting stressed, overwhelmed, and reverting back to exactly what you're comfortable with and never actually changing.
Yeah. And I mean, we never know it all. Like there's always something that we could be working on or refining or learning more about or, trying something different. And if you're in a point where you're like, well, I genuinely feel really confident with my wedding day, then think about creativity wise, how can you be more creative? How can you really bring this couple and create a gallery that is so specific to them? Like, sure, you might be like, yeah, I know how to prompt really well. I know my flash, I know my lighting, I know all this stuff, but then thinking about, okay, am I using the same prompts at every wedding where the bride and groom photos kind of look similar every single wedding day? All right, let's work on creativity, really think, where can I grow, or what am I excited to do different? Or maybe even what scares me to do something different, where you're like, no, I'm just so comfortable with doing it this certain way, where it's like, okay, what can I change that is going to make a difference? And so, even if that isn't necessarily a technique change that you're making, think about a creativity change that you can make, because there is always something that we can work on. And it kind of goes into the last thing too that we wanted to chat about, which was, shooting for your couple, your bride and groom, not shooting for you or Instagram or social media or trends. We again talked about this also last week in our episode, but even just to re-say it because it is so important. You're there for the bride and groom. Yes, you're looking for ideal clients for yourself and weddings that, are your ideal weddings to book. But ultimately, when you are then working with those people, or even if they might not be your ideal client, you are there on their wedding day. This is the only day in their entire lives that they're going to do this. Yeah, it might be the 20th one for you this year, but it's their one and only. And so really kind of shooting it with that in mind of like, this is their wedding day. How can I really truly give them a gallery that represents every piece of them and their people and what they love and who they love and how they're loved, and really making sure that they're always at that like center in the forefront of your mind when it comes to, that content that you're getting. The other day I was at a wedding a couple months ago, and it was just crazy to me because one girl had come up to me and she was like, oh my gosh, I have such amazing content for the wedding day. And she was like getting like BTS and stuff. And I just thought it was so interesting where I was like, I don't think I would have phrased it that way, but it was like, it was almost that like shooting it to get the content, and it was like, wow, I have fallen into that trap before, especially in my first couple years of like photographing, where it's like, no, I need to do something that performs well or works well or gets me more weddings or gets me to those clients I want. Don't use, maybe you have a couple that's not your ideal client. Don't use them as a stepping stone to your ideal clients. Really, truly focus on your bride and groom and what is important to them. And then if you have amazing content come from that, that's incredible. And if that's stuff that you can post and use, amazing, but don't shoot it with that in mind. So
yeah, no, honestly, I completely agree. And I think that it is something that you want to really make sure that you're paying attention to, because you, at the end of the day, have said yes to this couple. You've taken them on, regardless of whether it's a portfolio wedding or not. And so remind yourself that you are shooting for the couple. Take the opportunity of style shoots to shoot for content, right? But like these weddings are for shooting for your couple. And so all this to say, like these are multiple different things that you can do that are prep work before you even go to the wedding day. They're things that Hannah and I do like every single wedding that's so important to us, whether it be sending a questionnaire or asking the planner for the design deck, reviewing their timeline. There's a multitude of different things that obviously vary based upon depending on how much interaction you have with your client. But we hope that these were helpful for you. If you have any questions, like please let us know. We do have that freebie that Hannah mentioned earlier. That is how to work with a photo and video team. So if you're a videographer and you're wondering, how can I work better with a photographer and vice versa? We have created a guide so you can join our email list. The link is right on our website, and we definitely want to get that freebie over to you. But for now, we will see you next week on the We Got You podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. We would absolutely love it if you could take an extra minute to leave us a review and let us know what you think. DM us a screenshot of it and we'll send you a coffee on us. If you want access to an exclusive community, rad freebies, giveaways, and wedding referrals, then join our Facebook group today. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you're following along on Instagram at WeGotYou_podcast to stay up to date. We'll see you next week on the We Got You podcast.